reduce it.
Wow, we've never had
This
an
is
audience.
Lansing Online News Radio here at WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I am Bonnie Bucqueroux, soon to be joined by my co-host Bill Castanier. Bill and I shared a little session last, was it Wednesday or Thursday night, Bill, when we saw Mr. Charlie LaDuff down at Schuler Books? Thursday.
Thursday evening.
Thursday evening, and that was out at the
Eastwood Town Center,
Schuler's.
130 people.
Is that right? Is that some sort of record, I wonder?
It's for that style of event. They've had Carolyn Kennedy there, though, where people were lined up at 5 a.m.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a little bit
it's
different.
David Sedaris.
But I think we will see Charlie during their ranks at some point, in the sense that I think he's breaking pretty big nationally. He left there on that Thursday night because the next night he was going to be on the Bill Maher show out in Hollywood, so that was quite impressive. Did you get a chance to see that
No, I
segment?
don't get HBO, and I haven't pulled it up online yet.
Ah, okay. Well, has it been included online somewhere?
It should be online on the site.
Oh, okay. HBO. I didn't know.
They
if
archive.
Ah, okay. All right. Well, he gave a stirring talk that night about what was happening in Detroit. He told some interesting anecdotes from his book, Detroit: An American Autopsy. He has a unique take on the city. He's somebody who was a local, went away and became a big star in the writing world, working for the New York Times, stationed in their Los Angeles bureau for a long time, and now has come home to Detroit. He had left the New York Times, quit the Times, which very few people do when they don't have their foot
Especially
in
after winning a Pulitzer.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And now he's back in Detroit working for Fox TV there and pulling some interesting stunts, including planting, I guess I can't use the word plant, he denies it, but putting a 12-year-old girl in the audience to question Monica Conyers and made quite a fool out of her at that one occasion. And he talked about that in his book. It was quite impressive the other night.
You know, the things he didn't talk about, and I somewhat admire him for that, and I think it's difficult for him to talk about, is his personal family life, which he goes into great deal detail in the book.
Mm-hmm.
His sister was a hooker who got killed. The daughter of his sister was a drug addict who died from an overdose.
Yeah.
And there's some really poignant segments in that book that are really moving. And he has trouble talking about them. He can write about them, but he has great difficulty talking about them. For a lot of people there that hadn't read that book, they probably don't know that's a significant portion of the book.
It's the memoir piece.
Yeah. He doesn't let his family off the hook.
Yeah, yeah. I kept wondering, I saw him briefly this morning in a video clip as Kwame Kilpatrick left federal court this morning, looking a bit dazed, I might say. He was not quick. He did not answer any of Charlie's questions, although Charlie tried to get him to talk. So that was quite the impressive verdict this morning.
24 out of 30 charges.
Including the big ones.
Racketeering.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. Now, you said, I had seen one news account that had said minimum of 10 years, but you're saying minimum of 20 once you get it.
I thought racketeering was 20.
Yeah, that's going to be. Now, the only thing that I think may be good news, the only ray of sunshine for the family, is that his father, Bernard, was only convicted of one tax count.
He's not going to die in prison.
I hope. Yeah, I think that would be kind of sad. I don't know how much was Dad teaching the son how to behave, or how much was the son encouraging Dad to come into the family business, which apparently at that time was extorting many people in the city of Detroit.
One of the things Charlie made a point of, though, when asked was, is Detroit working? Is it getting better? And he says, this case proves it is.
Yes.
They've convicted Kwame Kilpatrick.
Yeah. Although he has already been convicted. I mean, he's getting multiply convicted in various jurisdictions,
federal.
Yeah, state and federal. I think the one you always have to, the toughest one, of course, is going to be federal, because there's really just no wiggle room there. We're not talking good time. We're not talking about being able to get out early. He's going to do some significant time behind bars. And so is his friend Bobby.
Yes. They really nailed him. They had him drop dead. They had him.
Now, when we saw that going on, we saw how long it took in that case. Couldn't believe the jury was out. M.L. Elric did that little video where he mimicked Bob Dylan, doing the blues and talking about the jury being out for so long. He's the person who really broke some of those early stories when an informant came to him with all those text messages. So
And that's really what started it.
that is.
I think the feds were into it anyway.
Well, I've always wondered. My assumption was that this has been a tradition in Detroit for a long time. I don't want to malign the dead without anybody having been brought up on charges, but certainly the rumors swirled around Coleman Young to the same degree that they did around Kwame. In fact, maybe even more so with Coleman. But it just struck me that it's again a case where I can't believe how stupid they are in being able to do things so openly that they're really not covering their tracks. There is a level of arrogance there that really surprised me.
They never thought they'd get caught. Really,
I guess
that's
so.
what criminals are about at that nature.
Well,
It's pretty amazing.
so politics in the state of Michigan, it gets really exciting. But before we get to that, there is one announcement you wanted to make because it's coming up pretty quickly here. The Broad Museum is going to be starting.
Yes, the Broad Museum is starting this Friday late night films, and I think they're going to move them outdoors when it gets nicer.
They better not try it this Friday.
This Friday they mentioned if the weather cooperates. I don't think March 16th the weather will cooperate
I don't think so.
at all.
No, no.
It might
What
be.
kind of film?
Well, I think they're going to be documentaries because that's what they focus on within the museum, short documentaries. So I think the first one is Rodriguez. It's searching for Sugar Man, the one that won the
Oh, really?
Academy Award, the Oscar.
Because that's been hard to see.
Yeah, and it's cheap too. It's $6.
Oh, that's not bad. Now, what kind of capacity can they hold quite a few?
I'll bet 200 inside that one room, maybe 150. It's hard to.
Is the seating banked at all?
No, I think you're going to be. No, it isn't. You're going to be on the floor. Very uncomfortable.
Get there early.
Yeah, and yeah, you can bring a picnic lunch. It says.
Oh, really? And what time is that going to be airing?
So it's late. Let me see.
Oh, these are nighttime.
Yes, they're nighttime. Yeah, and it's hopefully it's a tradition they want to continue. It is. It's at 9 p.m.
Oh,
So
okay.
it would go to around 9 to 11. Some of these.
Oh,
But,
yeah, Sugarman's a great film, from what I hear.
yeah.
Eager to see
Now,
that.
what would be nice if they start tying some of the exhibits into the films they show. Maybe they can do that at some point.
That would be nice. That would be nice. Not sure how easily done that is. There's
No,
one.
I think it'd be pretty hard, but
There's one additional event Wednesday night at 7 o'clock on campus in Kedzie Hall. We're going to be having the director, Dr. Yaron, what is his name? Yaron Brook.
Right.
And he is the director of the Ayn Rand Institute down in Austin. He's a professor down in Austin, Texas, and he's going to be coming here to explain to us why it is that we should be selfish. I don't know, all of the words I can think of are ones I can't say.
Capitalists, all in the Ayn Rand philosophy. I think you remember when we were doing the Tea Party, covering the Tea Party things, there was quite a few signs about Ayn Rand there.
Oh, yes.
They were a very literary group of people.
Yes. Big libertarian Rand followers. So it's always interesting, too, to see that because we just saw an example last week with Senator Rand Paul, named after Ayn Rand by his dad, do his filibuster on the floor of the Senate last week. That was quite impressive. The irony for me, of course, is that I always, as I wrote for Lansing Online News, it's like a stopped clock. He's right about twice a day, and in this case, he was right concerning the fact that there is no, the protocols concerning how you use drones are not clear. The only thing that really surprised me about what happened was that the answer from Eric Holder, which was designed to be as terse and kind of snotty as possible, which just basically said if you're a non-combatant, the answer about whether you're going to be, droned to death at a cafe is no. But the problem is, what if you're a combatant? And what does it take to be on the combatant list? We saw that President Obama was willing and able to not only do Anwar al-Awlaki, but also his 15-year-old son 2 weeks later was killed in Yemen. Because the only requirement is to be between the ages of 15 and 50 and stand anywhere near a known terrorist, and you become a combatant. So if I happen to be at a cafe standing next to somebody
Working at a cafe.
Then I guess I'm collateral damage. Except I'm female, so I don't count. Which does seem to me to be a little bit sexist. I guess in that case it's good news for, takes me off the death list. But I didn't think we got our questions answered.
No, I don't think so either. And like anything in warfare, it depends who owns the devices.
Oh, yeah. Although we still don't know who owns the little device that was at JFK Airport, the one that was at a few thousand feet when it wasn't supposed to be, when the pilot from Alitalia was coming in last week and saw a drone out the window. It was far enough away that I guess it wasn't a real danger, but when we see the damage that birds can do in the engines, I don't even want to see a little teeny tiny drone anywhere near my airplane as I'm landing
You know,
somewhere.
and there's a team of robotics experts at the University of Michigan, students that have designed a small drone.
Oh yeah, they've got little,
They're little robot drones.
yeah.
I think if a plane hit one of those, it'd be problematic.
You do know that soon the time will come, and I don't know that you'll be the person that'll be wearing one, but to go along with your ankle bracelet, you'll have a nice little personal drone with a camera in it that'll be buzzing around your head every place you go and watching who you associate with. I'm not sure that, I'm afraid too that drone technology is not that sophisticated or hard to do.
I don't think it's much more sophisticated, frankly, than the little helicopters.
Right.
Because you can buy maybe a $300-400 helicopter that can do some pretty amazing things.
I
And they've
always,
got memory in them.
if they were a little cheaper, I would have one so I could fly it out over my students in that big.
Oh, geez, that'd be funny.
Wouldn't that be great? Just all of a
Oh.
sudden have somebody open the door and have one come in.
That would be hilarious.
I know, I'd love it. Those are the kinds of stunts, however, where somebody might, pull out a gun and plug the helicopter. So I don't want to get into that. I thought about that last week when somebody was pranking. Did you see that on the internet where they were opening the doors to the elevator and you would see a murder in progress?
Right.
In my neighborhood, by the way, my neighbors would have just pulled out a gun and shot the person who was
Yeah,
assaulting the other person.
That's, in the world we live in, that's kind of risky.
No kidding. No
I
kidding.
wouldn't pull that kind of stunt.
I was a bit surprised. Well, it's going to be an interesting political era, and we're very fortunate this evening to have our monthly visit from Eric Schertzing, the Ingham County Treasurer, and also the Director of the Land Bank here in Ingham County. And there's some real political upheaval going on now that Senator Carl Levin has announced that he's no longer going to be our senator anymore.
There
He's going to
certainly
be
is.
retiring. What does that do to us?
Well, there's going to be all sorts of potential action going on. Candidates are lining up for that on the Republican side. Our local Congressman Mike Rogers included amongst the discussions with Terry Lynn Lamb, former Secretary of State in Michigan. And of course, on the Democratic side, you've got Gary Peters, and I'm sure there's some other names coming out.
Now, somebody floated Jennifer Granholm the other day. I mean, I don't know that she would come back to do that. Does that seem possible?
Well, I am always happy with female candidates. We have done very well by them. So, in the spirit of holding the seat, I certainly hope we have lots of good candidates looking at it, and certainly women included.
I wonder if Gretchen Whitmer really wanted to take herself out of the running so early. That might have been another one of the, with all these shifting pieces taking place in different places.
Well, Senator Whitmer only took herself out of the running for governor.
Governor, yes, but she might want to look at where does she live?
East Lansing.
East Lansing.
So that would be 8th District, right?
Oh, yes.
So she might be a potential candidate if Mr. Rogers decides that his neighborhood is no longer.
Yeah, 8th District is a tough district. I've been looking at the numbers. The president narrowly lost it. If you add up Stavenaw's numbers in the Senate race this past fall, she was able to carry it. But it's a tough race.
Did the boundaries change much in the last redistricting?
They dropped Shiawassee County out and extended further over into North Oakland County.
Okay.
I think almost over to the eastern, if not the eastern boundary of the county.
I suspect it doesn't look anything like it did in the old Bob Carr days. That's the first time I became aware of the 8th and all of its boundaries.
There's no Pontiac and Waterford.
No.
I know those areas
district.
well.
Yeah. So we really facing with redistricting a lot of challenges for the Democrats in this race, in the next go rounds because of redistricting?
Well, we've been through on the House side one set of those races already. The Democrats picked up 5 House seats. There were another 5 or so that were within a pretty close margin, less than a couple thousand votes. So there's some real opportunities there. I haven't paid attention to what the state Senate boundaries look like. Of course, Whitmer is going to be turned out in 2014. But Curtis Hertel, I know, is looking at that. Joan Bauer has talked about on the Democratic side, and at least our local Senate seat, that'd be pretty tough for a Republican to make inroads on.
Is there any possibility that Michigan will ever jettison term limits so that we don't see this sort of round robin musical chairs taking place?
You know, when I've been around discussions of that, it just seems so difficult. I would propose the alternative is really running a campaign to get rid of partisan reapportionment. I mean, I think we have gotten
Yes.
so good at gerrymandering that we've really undermined the democracy. Not all that, unlike the efforts in the South to segregate blacks out from and disenfranchise them. We really figured out how to do that through district mapping, and we need to fix that.
And big data is going to make it even easier.
Right.
I mean, you're going to be, they know what we do right now. So
I know, and the Obama campaign certainly has a sophisticated operation to mine all that data. I don't think it'll take too long for the Republicans to catch up. Ah, the Victory Lab, that's what
Yeah.
you've been reading.
Yeah.
Yes. And
It's
what
a-
is
it's
it, what insights does it tell us?
Well, it talks about what the Obama campaign has done so effectively for two cycles in micro-targeting voters, and also, I mean, Democrats got a lot of work to do. We're all in this together. We gotta marshal our forces together. There's a lot of folks in trailer parks and other areas that we've allowed to remain disenfranchised. Part of voter suppression is intimidation by just who's around you. And
socioeconomic
Yeah.
lifestyles, yeah.
and there's a lot of little enclaves that are much smaller than a precinct, where we need to, reach in there and touch those people one at a time, not on TV or through an oversized postcard.
Well, it's too bad that voting has now become a partisan issue. I mean, it shouldn't be. We now see one side really eager to suppress the vote, and the other side eager to expand the vote. And I guess I feel safe in saying that because I remember back in my old community policing days when one of our community policing officers in Lansing was told that if he again tried to organize that nice little voter registration drive, he'd be taken out of his job. So, I mean, it wouldn't seem logical that I mean, that's a perfectly valid thing for somebody to do is to try to get voters registered. But when you're doing it in poor neighborhoods, that's perceived as a Democratic vote, and Republicans don't see that as viable.
Sounds like a good thing for our local clerks to work on.
What also is going to happen at the, I don't know, that may be a better answer than counting on the Supreme Court. What's going to happen with their Supreme Court? Provision number 5 of the Voting Rights Act.
Well, it doesn't look good from oral discussions. I would hope they'd uphold it, but this Supreme Court is not necessarily favorable to that stuff.
I was stunned by Justice Scalia's questioning, where he called voting this as a racial entitlement. Boy, that word entitlement has been thrown around a lot lately, hasn't it?
Well, there was just something that came out in Iowa in the public schools. The Republicans have a bill to eliminate in the government class teaching about voting and about electoral politics. They were just going to skip over
That's not part of the government?
the students in Iowa apparently don't need to know
So-
that. So.
Oh, that's bizarre. Even I hadn't heard of that one. I thought, oh, that's beyond the pale. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ, here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Eric Schertzing about sort of baffling legislation that we're seeing go through in various places.
Well, our Secretary of State last year tried to do some pretty egregious things.
Yeah.
It seemed to fly in the face of, I'm not going to follow the law.
Right. So now we're going to see a little box on there saying that you have to claim your citizenship or not.
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 But it was only the threat of lawsuit that made that move along.
I know.
She didn't care what the law was.
See, to me, that means if you lose that, you should go to jail.
Mm.
It's a law. If you don't follow the law, I know it's not a criminal.
Well, I don't know what kind of
Yeah.
statute it really is. If you're going to follow the voter laws, don't you? Those are criminal
Criminal
penalties.
laws, yeah, you're right.
I mean, I don't see that as a simple matter. We've seen all too often. I mean, I guess if you're a bankster or a gangster or I don't know, in this case, somebody who worries about voting laws. You get. So what else are we seeing in the local community that we should know about, Eric?
We're going to have a little demonstration of bike share. Lynn Martinez has been working with a group of Capital Community Bike Share Cooperative, which is a new nonprofit, on the 23rd of March along Michigan Avenue at 1629 East Michigan. That's a Saturday from noon to 3. We're going to have some bike share technology, which is an opportunity for mobility.
How does that work?
Well, there's a couple different generations of it. We're going to take a look at what is the latest. Often it's been, if you're in Washington, D.C. or Minneapolis or some of the other big cities, they'll have a kiosk that has 10 bikes attached. And you use your credit card or have a membership, some type of setup, and you're able to rent bikes or take them for a brief period of time. I think what we're going to be looking at, which is maybe the fourth generation technology, is really having that kiosk control the technology on the bike so that that bike can really go
Oh,
anywhere and be left anywhere.
it'll have a little drone.
It'll have a little drone, little credit card reader, so we can charge it to get the bike out. And this is just a good placemaking effort. Michigan Avenue Bus Route 1 for CATA is the highest used bus route in the state of Michigan, 1,600,000
Really?
to 1,800,000 riders every year. We have this mobility corridor that runs from the Meridian Mall to downtown Lansing. I was on it today going to lunch. I mean, it's just this great easy on, easy off
Which a lot of
resource.
people I really don't believe, but it is.
That is stunning. I
And
had
we
no
have the
idea.
largest,
Yeah,
Wow.
bigger than Ann Arbor.
bigger than Grand Rapids,
Grand Rapids.
bigger than
Yeah.
Detroit. So great competition
I've
going.
been on that people mover.
Yeah, we're not talking about a people mover.
Mm.
Coleman Young was that was his baby. So we're gonna have that on the 23rd. I think that's something good. Folks are welcome to come by and take a look at that.
Now you
Um,
can't take the bicycle away from Michigan Ave then? It's to be used along that corridor?
well, it's whatever protocol you set up. If people certainly can take the bikes outside of the immediate corridor, there's a chip on the bikes that allow you to track where it is.
So,
And if you launch a bike share system, you have to have somebody that keeps track of where all the bikes are, so that you have them ready for when people want them. But along a transit corridor like Michigan Avenue is where they're going to be most popular.
you get a helmet at the same place?
No, helmets aren't. You'd have to bring that
You have to bring your
yourself.
helmet. Oh,
Bring your own
hmm.
helmet.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure how that works.
Not everything's perfect.
Not everything's perfect.
Go slow.
Go slow. We do have zip cars now. I've seen one in the parking
Yes,
lots.
they're around.
So they're around.
We
We're
do.
starting to do some of this more sharing, greening. Definitely commie stuff. Yes. I mean, all that sharing.
I'm hoping that we can get CATA eventually to allow us to advertise on the buses. I was in Washington, D.C. for a conference last week, and when I get on the metro system, it tells me what's going on in the community. What's at the Kennedy Center and what's.
What's the real problem with it? Do you know? Because I've never really been able to find an articulate reason for not doing it
They many years ago they had a bad experience with
with a
it.
single ad or something.
No, with a person that was selling the ads.
Oh.
So I think they've remembered that bad experience really far too well. We need to have a concerted community effort. I talk to folks all the time about this to get them to change their mind. Julie Brixey from Meridian Township, the treasurer, I know she's a new CATA board member, and I'm certainly going to be reaching out to her to have a conversation.
You know, they
about
did
that.
Poetry in Motion last year,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of debate about that, whether they should do it. They're going to do it again this year,
Oh, that's good.
so it'll be in
I
April.
like ads on the sign.
I do
I
too.
think they're kind of cool. And there's
When
plenty
you're
of
in public
community events.
transit
Yeah.
around the world, you get information from being in there. How else do you know what's going on?
One of my confreres in community policing was working with a number of police departments. They were selling ads on the back of patrol cars. Now, I think that may be going a bit far, but when budgets get tight, hey, I don't know, that extra revenue stream can be a good idea sometimes. I think they're kind of cool.
Yeah, well, the controversy is maybe over internal ads for the people that are riding, which you certainly want to have it for, versus the external ads. And some of those do get a little tacky
Oh, I kind
in
of
some
like
of the
those too.
communities. It's part of the boisterous street life.
Yes, it
Yeah.
sure
It
is.
brings things
Yeah.
to life.
I'm not sure I want to see deja vu there, but
I've got a Janis Joplin bust poster from London.
Oh, do you?
This poster's like 30 foot long.
Wow. Wow,
It's
cool.
nowhere you can put it up, but
Put
Yeah,
on
you
a
can
bus.
wrap buses.
yeah, I could put it
now.
on a bus.
You
Right?
can wrap buses.
Wrap buses,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be kind
Well,
of
Ann Arbor sells advertise on the outside of their buses.
I think it's kind of colorful. The only danger is it gets tacky if you don't get new ads and the old ones get kind of ratty. But I mean, those are things you can work out. We're still working on the helmet with a bike issue. I figure we can work out the buses.
And then, in Treasury world, we're getting close to tax foreclosure date again this year, April 1st. The world's getting a little bit better, not as better as fast as I'd like it to, but the incidence of delinquency and tax foreclosure is still continuing to ebb off. But that's always that's a tough day.
That's the question that I had told you I wanted to ask you. I've been reading all these articles about how the scofflaw rate of property tax payments in the city of Detroit seemed absolutely stunning to
It's
me.
huge. Yeah.
Huge. I mean, we're talking 40%?
Yes.
I mean, if 4 out of 10 people are not paying their property, doesn't that mean that the city then owns a lot of stuff? I mean, don't or is the process slower there because of this backlog?
Well, it's slower there. There's some history for many, many years until 5 years or so ago. The city of Detroit retained their own delinquent taxes, whereas everywhere else they come over to the county. And literally in the city of Detroit, paying your property taxes was optional because the city never foreclosed on people
Wow.
for the lack of payment.
Hmm.
When
Um,
did Detroit become Italy?
well, I'm sure somebody could put that date on it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't do that. Well, there are a lot of challenges, and when you're sliding downhill, you're not taking care of your P's and Q's on stuff. But you have to realize that the situations between counties are just very different.
I can't believe they're
Genesee
that
County,
different.
45 minutes up the highway. Last year, their rate of tax foreclosure was 7 times Ingham County's, and their population is only 50% higher. If you looked at the city of Detroit, it was 100 times
Lower.
more
Well, oh, yeah.
than what we had in Ingham County, and not because the population is 100 times. The population is 7 or 8 times.
So that's a pretty daunting task for any financial manager,
Oh,
emergency manager that moves in there.
how do you wrap your arms around anything?
Yeah. How do you get people to pay their taxes? They're not paying them now.
There is this balance between being so punitive that you're really people resist the idea that they would really want to own property in an area like that, and
Mm-hmm.
you have no forgiveness. And on the other hand, allowing that level of scofflaw where you're just simply your city coffers, especially in a city like Detroit that needs every dime they can get. One of the things that Charlie LaDuff made clear was that part of the reason Detroit has so many problems is because police and fire don't have any equipment. I mean, we're talking about really being starved for radios and, I mean, just sort of the
Hmm.
basic necessities because it's so hard to have enough money in the coffers to replace things.
Yeah, and of course, the millage rate that they assess to properties for those people that do pay is the highest in the state. It's in the 90s,
Yeah.
What's
last I
what's
knew.
Ingham County, for example?
Oh, your homestead is going to be 45, and 65 maybe on a non-homestead. It depends where you are a little bit. It can get a little higher.
So that has to be infuriating for people who see property taxes so high at the same time services are so low.
Things have to be fair. That is
Yeah.
certainly one of those areas that hopefully somebody can figure out a way to wrap their arms around
Wow.
for all of our benefit.
So are you as optimistic as Mr. LaDuff is that Detroit will be better off under an emergency manager and come back? He seems to be really persuaded that that's what it's going to take to turn the city around.
That's a very conflicting, and I've thought about this for quite a bit, as you can imagine. I understand why something extreme like that is necessary, but it's really hard for me to get beyond the lack of due process and constitutional safeguards,
That's
democratic safeguards when you go
Yeah.
that route. Um, but I suppose when things get just unfunctional, you go there. The challenge is, we have a lot more cities than Detroit that 5 or 7 years down the road, if we keep going along this way, we'll be facing the same thing. You have a state government that says they care about cities, but they cut revenue sharing. You have a
Yes.
governor that says he cares about cities, but they do a cutback in the taxes on personal property without full replacement. So we're just very, very dishonest in some of our conversations about what we care about and what we don't.
Federal revenue sharing and state revenue sharing have both gone by the wayside in the recent past. I don't think people realize the devastating consequences that that can have.
And that ties into the federal with the sequestration stuff.
Yes.
The U.S. Congress and Senate and President too, I suppose, have just bypassed one of their fundamental responsibilities, which is to have budgeting oversight. The Because there's not much of the year left for the level of sequestration, you're talking about 10% or so cutbacks in defense and non-defense programs for the rest of the year. That's significant. I think you can cut some fat out of the government, but that
But you
approach
don't
is
get to.
not the way you're trying to do it because it's across the board. It is
Right.
absolutely irresponsible. If you have kids at home and you have a little less money, you don't buy less milk.
Right.
You buy less honey maybe, but not less milk.
Hmm. Or you might,
Fewer games.
yeah. No, that's right, because you don't have the option. That's just going to be an across-the-board cut. And I think, unfortunately, the media has not done a very good job of really explaining what is happening and what will be happening with that. So far, all I've heard about is the White House tours being stopped, and that's about it. I think the consequences will be a little bit more dire than that, but that seems to be what people are focusing on.
No, hopefully they'll focus on something.
And they'll be more dire for communities that have intense federal funding too,
Yes.
which Michigan doesn't really.
No, we're fortunate in that instance, but you know they did this because they were just sure they would do something to get around it, and we've become so dysfunctional at the federal level, unfortunately, that that didn't work. So we need new representation. We need a new voice for
Well, we're
Michigan
having a
and
shakeup here,
Washington.
here at the state level. We'll see what that ends up meaning in the upcoming next two major elections coming down the pike. Thank you very much to Eric Schertzing for our monthly meeting with him to find out what's happening in the city of Lansing, Ingham County Treasurer and head of the Land Bank. And thank you for joining us. We'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you.
And we're going to want a book report on the Victory Lab by Sasha Eisenberg.
Oh, I've got a better one on walkability that I'd rather talk about.
Okay,
That's more
really.
fun. Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan, and we're going to shift gears to another topic as we talk about legislation that has really sort of changed things in Michigan. And in this case, the impact is not so much on human beings, although I think it has consequences for humans. We're talking about what's happening with wolves in the state of Michigan, and we're joined by Jill Fritz, and she's with the Humane Society of the United States, and she is our local representative on these issues. And she's going to give us a bit of history first about what's been happening with legislation that impacts wolves in Michigan and what's happening.
Well, to start with a little ancient history, wolves used to populate most of the continental United States. They were wiped out through just relentless persecution by the early 20th century through most of the United States, and pretty much took refuge in northern Minnesota. They were eliminated from the lower peninsula by 1935, and by 1965, when they went under state protection, there were only 6 wolves left in the upper peninsula. So when they went when they went under federal protection in 1973, I should say, that's when there were only 6 left. So under federal protection, they were able to recover quite a bit, and their population slowly increased. They migrated down naturally from Minnesota up through Wisconsin and back into the UP. And at this point, their population is estimated at 687 wolves. Unfortunately, last year, a year ago, they were removed from federal protection and went under state management in the Great Lakes states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Immediately in Minnesota and Wisconsin, legislation was introduced to start hunting and trapping wolves immediately. That legislation went through very quickly, and those seasons started up this past fall, killing more than 500 wolves through hunting over bait, trapping using steel jaw lake-hold traps, neck snares, and in Wisconsin, night hunting and the use of dogs was also allowed for wolf hunting in those states. Now, the animal shelters in Wisconsin got together and sued the state to try to stop the use of dogs, but they were unsuccessful, so that will start in the next season. Now, here in Michigan, it took a little longer for legislation to be introduced, but it was in October by Senator Tom Casperson in the UP to add wolves to the list of game species in Michigan so that the Natural Resources Commission could begin the process of starting a wolf hunting and trapping season. We fought it with everything that we had in the legislature, conservation groups, UP citizens, Lower Peninsula citizens, hunters, Native American tribes who very much oppose wolf hunting. They see the wolf as has a spiritual role in their community and their culture. Unfortunately, though, due to politics, the bill was rushed through quickly, and the governor signed it on December 28th to make the wolf a game species in Michigan.
So where does that leave us? When does the season start?
Well, now it's up to the Natural Resources Commission, which is a governor-appointed body of 7 people, to determine what type of a hunting trapping season would be enacted. So they're having public meetings every month. They meet, and there's a lot of testimony given by various individuals and organizations to try to convince them to do a hunting and a trapping season. What we are doing in response is we have formed a ballot committee called Keep Michigan Wolves Protected. It's a coalition of humane organizations, conservation groups, hunters, Native American tribes who are collecting signatures to get a referendum on the November 2014 ballot that would veto that legislation and take wolves back to protected status in Michigan. Now, I should point out that as soon as they were delisted last year, they went under state management, and a state law went into effect that does allow farmers, ranchers, and dog owners to shoot wolves if they are attacking their animals. So there's a mechanism in place for people to legally protect their animals in cases of wolf depredation. But and this veto referendum would not affect that. That would still be in place. But all we're saying is that a hunting season would be indiscriminate, inhumane, and would not do anything to address any concerns about wolf depredation.
Why did we see? Why do people kill wolves? Is it that they view it as a like deer, that they don't eat them? They don't view them as or do they view them as a particularly wily challenge, or is it because they say they're afraid of them? What's the reason that we saw the wolf population drop so dramatically? Why did they almost get exterminated?
Well, all of those reasons that you mentioned. There's a lot of misinformation about wolves, and there's almost, in some instances, almost a medieval perception of wolves as an evil creature.
The werewolf?
The werewolf, things like that. And there was also concerns, misguided, unfortunately, but concerns about competition for game, and concerns about depredation of livestock. And that was the reason why there were bounties on wolves, and they were just slaughtered, wiped out through most of the United States. But now that they've come back and they've been allowed to repopulate some areas, we're seeing that that wasn't actually the case, that wolves don't really need to be managed. They are wildlife management, that they are an integral part of the ecosystem and contribute to healthy deer herds, healthy elk herds, healthy moose herds, because they eat the sick and the injured and the weak and keep those populations healthy.
That's been part of the whole they do internal management that way.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a delicate balance, and they've studied that forever on Isle Royal.
Yeah.
It showed that was the case. Anybody that drives along I-75 or 69 or 94 can tell you about deer herds.
Right. Yes. We do need to have some antagonistic.
Yesterday we saw maybe 60 to 80 in one place.
Yeah.
I mean, and they all look like little dogs.
Yeah.
Because they're just.
And we've had mild winters where they haven't been thinned as well.
It was tremendously distressing to hear when the bill was moving through the legislature very quickly in the lame duck part of the legislature, that the testimony in the Natural Resources Committee on the legislation was overwhelmingly in opposition to a wolf hunt. Like I said, from native tribes, from scientists, from Upper and Lower Peninsula citizens. But the very few people that testified in favor of a wolf hunt gave some tremendously misguided misinformation about how the wolves are negatively affecting the deer population in the UP and affecting hunting negatively.
Really?
But in fact, if you go to, you read the DNR's website and their monitoring of the whitetail season, they'll say that they're experiencing extremely high numbers of deer in the Upper Peninsula and extremely high levels of hunter satisfaction. So there was no factual or scientific evidence presented in the legislature to support the bill that was shoved through anyway. So that's where we are.
Plus, there's fewer deer hunters every year.
No, that is
Oh,
true.
that's
I mean,
yeah. It's becoming less and less popular, isn't it? I mean,
and the ones that do hunt maybe never get out into the woods, so to
there's a little
speak.
bit of that, yes. I wondered also the new law that's going through that's designed to change the DNR, where it would now become illegal to have a focus on the law being for the benefit of the wildlife. Seems to be one of the stranger pieces of legislation. Does that relate to your efforts related to the wolves?
Are you speaking of the biodiversity bill,
Yes.
Senator Casperson's bill? I don't know too much about that, except that it would eliminate the biodiversity provision
Yes.
when designating new protected lands, something like that. But no, I have not been involved in that.
Okay, I just wondered if that might have some impact on the wolves.
Not really, except that it's one of Senator Casperson's interesting collection of pieces of legislation in this past session and this session. the wolves, the bear cubs, and biodiversity.
Oh, yes.
Do you have any idea how the ballot issue signature program's coming?
It's going very well.
I see them a lot of places.
Yes, we're all over the state. I was just up in Petoskey this past weekend, but we have collectors all the way from Houghton down to Detroit and St. Joseph up to the Sioux. So we're all over the state. The overwhelming response we get from everyone wherever we are is, "Oh, thank goodness you're here. I'm so glad. I've been meaning to sign your petition." The citizen response to our ballot initiative, or referendum, has been overwhelmingly in support of it. So we're confident that we'll reach the goal, the amount of signatures that we need to collect by our deadline of March 27th.
Has there been polling on the issue?
Yes, we did do polling back in late last year before we started the referendum process, and it was in favor, showing that citizens are not in favor of hunting wolves in the state.
Now, Bill, you have a Native American heritage, and the wolf is very
It's
important
the brother.
to that culture.
Yeah, the wolf is a brother.
And have they been outspoken on these issues?
Oh, very.
Yeah.
Very.
Yes, absolutely.
If I don't get an email a day about it, I'm just kind of surprised.
Do you think they're having any clout with the
No,
legislators?
probably not.
Sadly, they were pretty much ignored.
People do not care about American Indian issues unless it involves a casino.
That's, yeah.
I mean, that's really the only. That's the only thing that got elected officials to listen to American Indians was casinos. And where they don't have casinos, they don't listen to them. I mean, look at the violence against women.
Yes. Trying to extend that
to the tribal. That's why it's not
yeah.
happening.
Yeah, no, it's been very frustrating. When we see this happening with the wolves, however, what I really can't understand is what are the constituent groups that are pushing this?
There's a few extremist hunting type groups that are really egging this issue on. As you might be familiar with, there was a wolf management roundtable that was convened a few years ago in 2006 of different stakeholders, environmental groups, humane groups, and the different hunting organizations, the bear hunters, the whitetails, Michigan United Conservation Clubs, all sat down and worked on an advisory report for the DNR to create a wolf management plan so that if wolves were delisted, federally delisted, and went under state management, there would be a concise and detailed plan for wolf management. And the Wolf Management Roundtable itself did not come to any consensus at all on any type of recreational hunting of wolves. There was so much disagreement within the Management Roundtable that they tabled it. And if you read now the DNR's Wolf Management Plan, it says right out, this is the one issue we could not come to any consensus on. However, now that the wolves have been designated as a game species, those extremist members of that Wolf Management Roundtable are very busy lobbying the Natural Resources Commission to include hunting and trapping in a wolf season. So we're talking like the Michigan Hunting Dog Federation, Safari Club, groups of that nature.
And oddly enough, well, it's not odd, you'll find that people who hunt trophies are wealthy people a lot. And they do have some influence.
So they put some money into this campaign.
Absolutely. Or they take people hunting.
When you talked about the fact that deer hunting and the numbers are declining, Bill, one of the things that I was unaware of this sort of, to me, hidden world of hunting preserves around the state.
Mm-hmm.
And once an animal is listed as a game species, and in fact they're also doing some, wild boar and other kinds of things, strange little animals that they'll put out in these hunting preserves. It's really, my father came home very sickened one time because as an executive in Ohio, he went out on a trip with fellow executives and they went to one of these places decades ago, and he just came home horrified. He was just stunned. He didn't ever want to do anything like that again. But is there potentially, could the wolf become a big draw at a hunting preserve?
That's a very good question because this would be totally separate, I believe. These would just be wild wolves. I do not know what the law, how that would cover
if it's a game
these
species,
captive
I'm afraid
species, and that's a very good question.
I'm sure they would be trying to trap them in order to bring them in and make that a very high fee to get a shot at one. I'm afraid these are the kinds of things we might see.
People are looking to put one on their wall.
Yeah.
Stuff it.
There's no other reason that we can really think of because you don't eat wolves. They're extremely shy animals and almost never are any type of threat or danger to humans. They want to get away from much more than we want
And
to
they're
see
smarter
them.
crossing the road than the average skunk.
Yes. Or sometimes the average human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you hardly ever would see a wolf killed by an automobile.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Joe Fritz of the Humane Society of the United States about the potential that wolves will become a hunted species here in Michigan. My old friend up in Flint, Michigan, who was a Flint U of M professor for many years, Dr. Harry Frank, had a wolf. And he had a wolf illegally for a while, but I think he actually had the only federal permit, but the fact that he had it in his backyard in the city of Flint was probably not something that was really allowed. And it was kind of funny because he lived in a neighborhood where you'd hear his wolf Samantha howl at the moon, right? And when he was tell all the neighbor kids would come along and they'd say, "What is that?" And he'd say, that's a dog, half wolf, half dog. And the one kid came up and said, "Dr. Frank, those people, they kind of defrauded you. That's not a dog, that's a wolf, man." And it was indeed. And she was so shy, I could barely get a look at her. She did not want to be around humans. And that was what he was saying, was that there really are no documented incidents of human beings having been killed by a wolf. He looked in the research and he said, you really can't, I mean, they're not a threat to humans, so that's not the issue here.
No, certainly not in Michigan. There's never been a documented case. There, in the past 100 years, in North America, there have been 2 cases in which wolves allegedly killed a human being. One in Canada in 2005 and one in Alaska in 2010. There's still debate ultimately about what happened there, but yes, they're extremely shy and want to be as far away from us as possible.
Dogs have killed a lot more people than that.
Yes, many more, many other
And
species.
yellow jackets.
Well, yeah, that's right as well.
Mosquito bites. And yes.
Now, Harry told me that at one time the Air Force, because wolf hair is so unusual, it has these guard hairs, and they're very good for keeping the ice off the animals, obviously, because it traps and it has this tremendous insulating quality, that the Air Force once placed an order for 10,000 parkas that were trimmed around the facial area with wolf pelts. He said at the time, of course, there weren't 10,000 wolves in the United States, so it was kind of one of these ironies where they put out this RFP wanting these parkas with wolf trim around at the edge of the parka. But he said, he thought about the possibility that they could actually be raised and farmed in that sense as a domesticated animal because of the value of their pelts, in the same way that we do with mink, because he was literally afraid that wolves were going to disappear from the face of the earth. Are we risking extinction if they don't?
It all depends on the type of hunting and trapping season that they come up with. And the DNR has said they're being very careful about this because the population limit was 200 wolves to come off the endangered species list, and 200 wolves combined in Wisconsin and Michigan. So they're very cognizant of the fact that if that population dips below 200 again, they may face having to put them back on the endangered species list.
Those numbers are too low, aren't they?
Yeah, extremely low. Like I said, there's 687 of them now. Although the DNR has indicated that they are seeing the population growth slowing down. Wolves will naturally regulate their own population according to available prey and habitat. So they may be at the point in the UP where they're reaching that point and they're starting to slow down, reproduce less, and adjust to their surroundings. So, but ultimately, I hope that when we collect the amount of signatures we need and we hit that deadline, that we'll put that legislation on hold. So they can't move forward on doing any kind of hunting or trapping season until the November 2014 election, when the issue was decided on.
Can we split the 2 issues between hunting and trapping and at least get trapping off the table?
That's up to the Natural Resources Commission to decide, but they are being heavily lobbied by the Michigan United Conservation Clubs to include trapping in whatever plan they come up with. I should point out too, as I mentioned, in Minnesota and Wisconsin in these first seasons that were horrible. There were more than 500 wolves killed, 400 in Minnesota, 116 in Wisconsin. Trapping was an integral part of those seasons, neck snares and lake hold traps. In Minnesota, 75% of the wolves killed in that quota were killed in traps.
So
and in Wisconsin,
that's
more than
not
50%.
No, that has nothing to do with.
It's tremendously sad.
I just don't understand why we still allow trapping. Are there states that have banned it?
Yes, California and Massachusetts and maybe Colorado, well, at least one other state have banned recreational trapping.
Can you
Commercial
trap a
trapping
bear
is
in
not
Michigan still?
No, as far as I
Lansing.
know, Maine is the only state that allows
Okay.
bear trapping.
What is the story on the baby bears? I hate to change the topic, but I'm hopeful that everybody is aware of the fact that we will be having this referendum, we hope, if we can get
Mhm.
enough signatures. Now, how many are required?
161,330 signatures to qualify a referendum for the ballot.
And we
So,
have till.
March 27th.
Are there places right now in the local area that you could tell people where they might be available?
You can go to our website, keepwolvesprotected.com, and
Mm.
at the top of the page it says sign here, and you'll find locations all over the state where people are regularly there to collect signatures.
Isn't it sad that we don't allow that kind of online registration and signing for petitions? Boy, that would be
Not yet, not for
not yet.
this.
That
Yeah,
would
they're
be an
legal
important
documents.
thing to be able to do. I
Mhm.
sign all. I find myself. I know they don't do as much good as they should be. The change.org and all the petition sites, but it would be wonderful if we could do one of those.
Especially this weather.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. But one of the other issues I'm sure you're looking at. What's the story with the baby bears?
There are a few captive bear facilities in Michigan where you can go in and see captive bears. And under Michigan's Large Carnivore Act that was passed in 2000, it's illegal for the public to have direct contact with the bears for
Okay.
for public safety reasons, of course, and for issues of the animal's welfare. One of these outfits up in Newberry, up in Lewis County in the UP, has been violating that law for several years now by allowing the public to come in, have the family and the kids come in, set a baby bear cub on their lap, and take a picture with them and make a couple of bucks with these photo ops. Finally, someone reported them to the authorities, to the USDA, which inspects these because they're also covered under USDA. And said you're basically violating the law by allowing direct public
Yeah.
contact with these bears. So instead of complying with the law, they went to their legislator, which is Senator Tom Casperson, and
He's a busy guy.
he introduced a bill allowing for the public handling of bear cubs who are less than 9 months old and less than 90, I forget what a certain amount of pounds.
Pounds.
So, um, of course, our reaction was, "Are you kidding me?" But the bill did go fairly quickly through the legislature, despite our testimony and numerous studies and reports on injuries to people who come in direct contact with captive bears, and the fact
I
that
think we
baby
ought to let him do it. With the
And-
mother in the same room.
yeah, baby bear cubs are not puppies. They have very sharp, non-retractable claws, and they can be
In the grand
extremely powerful.
evolutionary scheme of things,
Yeah,
the people
that's
that
what
would
I'm
let
thinking.
their children.
Oh my God.
Maybe we want to take them out of the
So,
gene pool. I don't know.
It's very
So
sad. And of course,
strange.
the Detroit Zoo, Michigan Humane Society, the Potter Park Zoo, the AZA accredited, very knowledgeable zoo professionals in the state also fought it very hard. But for some reason, the bill passed at the end of the last session, and actually the governor vetoed it for other reasons, due to some other language tacked on at the end, but indicated that the bill pretty much had the green light to be reintroduced in this session. So just a few days ago, it did pass the final hurdle in the House. It went back to the Senate for a revote, I think, on immediate effect, and then goes to the governor's desk.
So we're going to kill wolves because they're so dangerous, although we never see them. But we're going to let little kids fondle little bear cubs. Oh boy,
Very
that's
sad.
It's a good thing to learn at an early age too, because then you could wrestle bears when you get older, I guess.
Well, some of us, as you well know, Bill, when I was 5 years old, my grandmother took me to wrestling at Cleveland Arena, and
And
the
there was a bear,
halftime show
yep.
was a guy wrestling a bear.
Yeah,
Oh
that
my
was
gosh.
not uncommon.
No, it wasn't, and it was absolutely awful, and I was appalled as a child. Probably the only thing I hated more than clowns. And the only thing that made me kind of happy was that they gave the bear a bottle of orange soda as a treat for not having killed the human. And at the time I was and still am addicted to orange soda, so I thought that was a good deal for the bear. But now I don't think that's very good for the bear either.
Well, they used to give them alcohol too, I remember.
They did, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought we outgrew these things, but clearly we haven't.
And also on top of the violation of the state law, there have been numerous citations of this captive bear facility for violations of the Federal Animal Welfare Act too. So But
So
that
the
was
place
not
that we're
enough to
talking
stop
about
it.
is not
Mm.
taking very good care of its
No, and
animals?
you can see all of the federal animal, the inspection reports online to see all the violations.
I think we've become increasingly aware, too, that a lot of the places that have animals in captivity, the petting zoos and so forth, are probably not a really good idea. An evolved society would be moving away from these things.
One would hope.
I
Yes.
just saw that Deer Acres, which is up near Standish, Michigan, reopened and has been renovated. I was excited to see that this weekend. Right next to a sign for bear feed.
Oh.
I didn't know we could. I guess we can't feed deer, but we can still feed bear.
I think the captive bears.
No, no, it wasn't captive
Oh,
bears.
okay.
It was
Uh,
wild bear,
I
so
see.
for hunting
That
purposes.
seems like a recipe for disaster, but
Outside of Ludington, I once went to, because it was the only place available when I was going to run the Ludington Half Marathon, I stayed at Furwerda's Happy Acres. And they had Henry and Hank, two macaques in a cage. And you could have your pictures taken with Henry and Hank, who would sometimes put their heads through little wooden cutouts. I mean, it's bizarre that we would have these in a northern climate. I mean, I'm unhappy enough about zoos, and I think plenty of zoos are not something that thrills me. I get into a lot of fights with my friends who are big Potter Park fans, but I might not have difficulty if we had a place where kids could see Michigan wildlife in its natural habitat done well. But I don't see any reason to have tropical animals in the middle of Michigan in cages that are far too tiny for them.
well, I should add, Representative Andrew Kandrivas has introduced legislation to prohibit the ownership of primates as pets in Michigan, so that's a step in the right direction.
You mean that's not illegal now?
No, it's not.
Oh, I thought it was. I thought that was a federal law.
No.
Oh my
You
goodness.
can own an animal that can pretty much dismember you.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's.
nice touch, huh?
Oh,
It's a strange world, and people used to swallow snakes, and they thought it was weird.
can I ask what's been happening on the circus front lately? Is that an issue that the Humane Society has been involved in?
There was some issues with a. I'm trying to think of what has happened recently. I honestly cannot think of any issues recently here in Michigan.
Okay.
Are you talking about with the
Well, I
Humane
know that
Society?
a campus group that I had
Yeah.
been in contact with was trying to persuade MSU not to rent out its facilities to the circus anymore.
Right, that was, yes, the
SPAR.
student group SPAR at MSU were trying to convince the Breslin
The
Center
Breslin Center
not to have
allow.
a circus come every year because of animal welfare concerns. And I've seen there have been some protests for the Shrine Circus around the state.
Yes.
But that's about the extent of what I've heard recently with circuses.
Another odd issue, I was working on the avian flu task force, and at one point what I found out about was a sort of underground trade in exotic animals. Apparently there is a sort of floating kind of auction that takes place at various places in Indiana. And you can go down there and get many animals that might not be available on the open market elsewhere. And they do, it's sort of a hidden world. It's really an evil business, isn't it? I mean, we see these animals, so many of them come into this country. The loss ratio is horrific back in the home country where so many parrots, for example, have to die for one to get here, that kind of thing. You must be busy all the time.
Yeah, that's more of a federal enforcement issue, but
Okay.
yes, it is very sad.
Well, part of the issue has to be as well, there just simply isn't enough enforcement, is there? I mean, with the government cutbacks that we're seeing,
Yes.
are we sure that the animals that are in these facilities are being well taken care of? How
It-
often are they checked?
It's hard to imagine because the USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service has about an average of 2 inspectors per state, and they have to inspect every research lab, dog breeding facility. If they're a Class A or Class B breeder or broker, they have to be inspected every year. If they're actually the Class B brokers have to be inspected 4 times a year because of the astounding amount of violations of the Animal Welfare Act that they've racked up. So federal inspectors are stretched pretty thin in trying to inspect all these places. So yes, I'm sure there's a lot of work for them.
It just, I often prefer animals to humans, sad but true, and so it does, that's a cause near and dear to my heart. There's nothing that makes me sadder. That must be tough work.
It is hard sometimes to see some of the cruelty and neglect. But in other ways, it's very encouraging. I mean, after all that we've been talking about with wildlife in Michigan, the fact is Michigan has some of the strongest animal cruelty laws in the country.
Really?
So we've seen some tremendous victories. Last year, a package of bills was passed that makes our animal fighting law the top in the country.
Is that
So
right?
not only when you're arrested for animal fighting in Michigan, you not only face felony animal cruelty charges, but you also are charged with racketeering, and your
Ooh.
property and assets that were gained from animal fighting are seized. So,
Wow, that is a huge
yes, you
difference.
don't want to come to Michigan to fight animals anymore, that's for sure. So,
Well, that's good news. We'll
yeah.
end on an encouraging note. So I'm
Mhm.
afraid to ask another question and find another depressing answer. So thank you very much to Joe Frist of the Humane Society of the United States, our state representative here. And thanks also to Eric Schertzing, who joined us earlier, the Ingham County Treasurer. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. And you've been listening to Lansing Online News Radio with Bonnie and Bill. We'll see you next Monday night at 7 o'clock. Thank you. And that was wonderful.
Oh,